Hey guys, this is Lil with another raid video. Today we are talking about beginning Hydra, how you get started in Hydra, everything you need to know. I've done a few videos on Hydra in the past. They've been more deep dives into specifics, so team buildings, team composition, what buffs and debuffs to bring. Today we're going to try and get all of that covered off in one video. I'm going to timestamp it to try and make it easy for people who are just sort of getting started with Hydra. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing to say is, do you intend to play it manual or auto? It's going to be way harder to get a good result when you're running auto than when you're running manual. When you're running manual, you've got way more control. You can hold your abilities because you can see that, that you haven't got a debuff up. Etc. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. The second thing is, it's not all about champs. Everybody thinks that it's just they just haven't got quite the right champion or quite the right lineup. I would say on the whole it's probably 50% gear, 50% champs, and I've absolutely done been helping out clanmates, trying to build exactly the same team that I run that can easily wonky and way more than that these days. But because they didn't have the gear, they weren't getting the same results that I was getting, and they were struggling. And again, because they weren't able to bring some of the sets that I was able to bring in the gear thresholds that you're able to do. I'm not trying to boast. I'm just saying it depends where your gear's at, as well as what champs you've got. So the first thing that we'll talk about is also difficulty. Difficulty makes quite a big difference. So you can get away with a lot more things on some of the lower difficulties than you can on the higher difficulties. Like normal and hard, you can survive without some things. So let's say, we're going to go into the heads in a minute, but there are certain things that you need, and you can skip some of those on the lower difficulties if your champs are geared well. So one of the teams that I might show is the Razzlevarg team, which is really great, really high damage, and it's full auto, and it's a great team. It doesn't run a Mischief tank, and that's because it kills things fast enough that you don't need to worry about it. Do some champs get their buffs stolen? Yes, but you're running block buffs, so it doesn't really matter. Does their turn meter get stolen at the same time? Yes, it does. But again, because you're killing things so quickly, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect the run a massive amount. The other thing is the type of damage dealer that you bring changes depending on the difficulty. So normal and hard, those max HP damage dealers that everyone thinks about when they think Hydra, those Husks, those Royal Guards, those Acrisias, if you're lucky enough to have one, they're not doing their full potential if you're running them on hard. You're better off bringing a normal damage dealer, like a Tunisia, like a Razzlevarg. They're just the HP, the health of the heads isn't as high, so you don't get as much damage out of those enemy max HP champs. Don't get me wrong, if they're what you've got, you can totally run them, and I do on my free-to-play account. I run Husk on hard because it's all I can hit, and he does fine, but he's not pulling the same kind of numbers that he is on, let's say, Nightmare or Brutal. So let's flip over and we'll talk about heads. There we go, I managed to get the right button. Okay, so Hydra Heads and what they do, okay? I should have ordered these in order of annoyance, but I haven't, so apologies. Though starting out, Torment probably is your most annoying. So the Head of Torment, I should also point out that every rotation, the 4 starting heads change, but when you kill one of those heads, any of the other heads can spawn back in. Again, on the lower difficulties, you're much more likely to get the same head again. On higher difficulties, it's much more random. So, you might not have a Torment in the starting heads, in the first 4 heads, the starting heads. But then it might pop out later. So again, if you've not brought an answer to the Head of Torment, then you can expect that you're going to get feared a lot. I guess, so Torment, anybody that attacks it will take a fear. It gets feared, you can't resist it, you can't block it, so don't think about it. The only way to stop getting feared is with Veil or Perfect Veil, or with a Shamel is like the counter to that. And in that instance, then Torment becomes your friend, because suddenly Shamel is boosting the leader of your team every time that he takes a fear off your team. So actually, Torment then helps you by providing a lot of turn meter to your leader, which is great. I would also say another kind of counter to Torment is a lot of damage. I don't bring a counter to Torment in my Nightmare team. I bring Newt. And when Torment's up, I target Torment with Newt's A3. And with a couple of those, it'll go down. Yes, Newt will get feared, but he's got his main ability away. And so killing Torment quickly can also be an answer if you don't have an answer. Okay, so on to I would say the two most annoying ones. Torment feels like the most annoying one when you're first getting started, but I would say these two are the most annoying, full stop. Mischief steals your buffs, and you cannot target it. So the answer to Mischief is block buffs. I would say block buffs you want to bring anyway, because there's a lot of annoying buffs in Hydra that you don't want to deal with. But most people bring what's called a Mischief tank, which is the Mischief head will always target the person with the most buffs, no matter what. That's who he's going to try and steal buffs off, the person with the most buffs. So what you do is you bring somebody with more buffs than anyone else. So somebody who buffs themselves. Soulless does it. He buffs himself with a shield. Who else does it? The new archer. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name. The new archer does it. She buffs herself with increased accuracy on the A1. Ragash does it. He buffs himself with increased defense. The thing to remember is if you're bringing someone with a unique buff to act in this Mischief tank role, you can't bring that buff in your team. So let's say Skull Lord Vargal buffs himself with Strengthen. He's also great because he does Provoke, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But the problem is that then you can't bring Mithrala into that team because she brings a Strengthen, and as soon as you got Strengthen on the whole team rather than just him, then suddenly he doesn't have a unique buff anymore. I would say obviously Hex is good because then you can actually target the Head of Mischief. That's really good. And if you've got Hex in your team, you should target Mischief because it's actually quite easy to kill. If you don't, it's really hard to kill it, like if it swallows your champs, and that's why Hex is very good to bring. You can also bring a buff strip, and again, if you're just starting out and let's say you've got a Madame Cerise, you can bring her as a buff strip, or bring a Mishnaki as a buff stripper. And if your buffs do get stolen through the block, let's say that you've brought block buffs and a buff stripper, that's an okay answer. You are going to get turn meter stolen because when he steals buffs, he also steals turn meter. But on the whole, you'll probably be fine. It'll be annoying until you kill him, and then he'll be gone. Excuse me, coffee. Okay, Head of Decay. I must remember to talk about Devour Timers. Head of Decay is the cleanser. So 2 skills, one's a cleanse, one's a massive shield. If you don't destroy the shield before it runs out, then they get a full heal. Really annoying, really, really annoying, because you've got all your buffs out, you've got all your debuffs out, your block debuffs, your decreased defense, all your HP burns, and suddenly it just cleanses them right off. And what we'll talk about in a minute is often you'll find Decay alongside Blight, who puts out a poison cloud that means all hits are weak hits, and they're often sort of together in a rotation, and you'll get all your debuffs out, and then suddenly Decay will go, cleanse them, Blight will go, poison cloud, and you've got 2 turns of just not being able, 2 Hydra head turns of not being able to do anything. Pretty much. The answer to Decay is Provoke. So I would say that's probably my number 2 must bring now It used to be way lower, and I just you just sort of try and deal with it. But I find that having the more consistent your provoker, the better. And some great people who do that role are the Archer Nerganante Archer, and Morley and Skull-Lord Vargal. Bival's pretty good. Soulless is good. There's quite a few sort of good provokers. And again, you can also just bring 2 champs with a lot of AoEs in provoke sets, like put your Necmo and your Uko in a provoke set, because they've both got AoE A1s, and they'll get a lot of in a taunting set, and they'll get a lot of provokes. So you can manage it that way. It's a bit more sketchy, but okay. Suffering, I would say mainly you can ignore Suffering, right? It's the tankiest head. It increases the resistance of everyone else, so you need a little bit more accuracy if the Suffering head's around. But for the most part, it's putting Ally Protect out, it's putting Reflect Damage out, it's putting a Pain Link on one of your champs so that they take damage when you deal damage. For the most part, you can ignore it apart from the extra turn. So one of its skills, it's A3, whatever that's called, I have no idea, gives it an extra turn. So when you're further into the fight and suddenly the devour, you've got to get your champion out from being devoured after 2 turns, which we'll talk about in a minute. That's 1 turn if the Head of Suffering is going to get to use his A3. So you've got to really switch your priorities and target it. Apart from that, you can mostly ignore it. Block buffs is going to do your work for you here. It's going to block those reflect damage, those ally protects. You can bring a buff strip if not. And I would say just keep an eye on that extra turn on your devours. Okay, Blight we talked about. It's going to put a poison cloud out there, which will make all hits weak against anyone who's got the poison cloud. If you kill the head of Blight, then all the poison clouds will disappear. You can also have HP burns on, and the poison cloud won't have any effect at all. There are some champs that can place HP burn through the poison cloud. I'm trying to think. I know Geomancer can. I know. What's his name? I keep wanting to say Mishnaki, and it's not him. Mordecai can place it through. I think Jamesia can also place the poison cloud through. Place the burns through poison cloud. But really, have your HP burns on first, or just have block buffs up, which you're bringing anyway. And that's why I would say block buffs number 1, just for all of the ones that we've talked about, and Wrath, which we're going to talk about next. It counterattacks after it gets hit 16 times, and it hits very hard. It also provokes. It also buffs itself with increased attack. If you get hit by it when it's got increased attack, it's going to hurt a lot. So you always sort of see when the rotation changes to one that's got Wrath in, because suddenly your team drop and you go, oh yeah, I was supposed to bring decreased attack this rotation. Bring decreased attack is the answer. I would say don't avoid AoEs, because I think that's impossible. Let's get rid of that. Increased defense is good, yeah. Also, some protection for your team, whether that's ally protect or I would say also a buff stripper for when it does. Obviously, block buffs will stop it getting its increased attack, which is very useful. A cleanser to cleanse off the provokes that it puts on your team. And then some tanky buffs like ally protect or increased defense or strengthen will help. Okay, so before we move on, let's briefly talk about Devour. So obviously, at the start of the fight, somebody gets marked. In fact, let's go to the game. Here we go. I luckily have 1 Hydra key left because I haven't done it yet. So I think we're on Brutal. Here we go. Oh, I didn't want to run Val in this team. Anyway. Okay, so we've started our fight and our heads have spawned in, and you can see my Jamesia has a little 20 Devour over her head. Mark of the Hydra, 20 turns. So in 20 Hydra turns, Hydra head turns, she will get devoured. And I will then have a set number of that Hydra head's turns to get her out. So this is why, you know, it's difficult because the things that you need in Hydra are quite a lot, but you also need to bring enough damage to actually break your champs out in time. I'll just leave this running so that we can see if she gets devoured. I probably won't leave it running that long though. So yeah, and as the fight goes on, the amount of stacks of the sort of time until you get eaten are lower, and the amount of turns that you have to break them out is also lower. It goes down to 2 turns. I can't remember when. It's somewhere around like somewhere between turn 150 and turn 1 and turn 200. It drops right down to 2 turns to break them out, and that's when it gets really, you know, it gets difficult. If your team is stacked heavy with supports and not so much with damage because you didn't have, you know, Hydra is about bringing a lot of things in only 6 champs, and that's why people like Mishinaki, people like the Archer are really good because they bring so many of those. That's why Ugo is really good because she brings a lot of things that you need: a cleanse, a heal, block buffs, block buffs, decreased defense, and leech, all in one champ. That's what always makes the best Hydra champs. You see, here we go. Look, she's already down to 6 stacks. So again, you know, you could try and count that, you know, to figure that out. So okay, let's also just pause that for 1 second. So we've been through all the heads and their counters, and we just left this running to talk about the Devour Timer. It does bring up a good example here where we killed, so this head was about to respawn, and then we killed the head of Mischief over here. When they all have a decapitation effect, what happens to them when they get decapitated. I can't remember where it is. Is it here? No. Okay. They all have an effect. I'm sure it says in here somewhere, but I can't see it. And Mischief's effect is reducing the turn meter of all the other Hydra heads. So if you've got a Hydra head already dead, like this one, and then you kill Mischief, then all their turn meters go back. So you get more time on the devoured head, on the decapitated heads. Though that's an excellent point because we haven't talked about it. The way that you deal damage in Hydra really is hitting these heads when they're decapitated. So you're surviving, you're getting heads low, you're focusing one of them, you kill it, it gets decapitated, and then you can start doing damage to it. So this is where, you know, and what you want, so they will keep the turn meter that they have at the point that you kill them. So what you want to do is if the health's getting low of one of the heads that you're killing, but its turn meter is really high, what you want to do is focus your damage somewhere else so that you kill that head at the point that its turn meter is really low. So wait for it to take its next turn, then kill it, and then you've got a full turn meter bar, and again. So you get two turns of a decapitated head, and where the turn meter bar is on the first turn depends where it was when you killed it. So if you kill it with a full turn meter bar, it's going to almost straight away flip onto its second turn, and then you only get 1 turn meter bar of hitting that exposed head for damage. So yeah, and that's why things like slow are really important, because actually if you can kill it when its turn meter is really low, you've got 2 turns of full turn meter bar with slow on. Do you know what? That's a long time. In reality, that's a long time for you to actually get some damage away on that head. Look at that, you see? Then you get the perfect combination of cleanse plus Poison Cloud while your champ's devoured, which will then let Blight get off a shield. Thankfully, it won't go onto this champ. He will shield the person with the lowest health, which is himself. Anyway, let's flip back. Sorry, we got distracted. I was talking about the Devour Timer, but talking about head decapitation and the turn meter bar as part of that is also something I wanted to cover off. So let's talk about buffs and debuffs. We talked about them briefly in terms of how to counter the heads. Some heads are more annoying than others. I would say block buffs is your number one. And I've got a deep dive video which I'll link to talking about what I think is essential and nice to have. I would say block buffs, essential. I would say a provoke is essential. I would say a mischief tank is essential on higher levels. It's not essential on lower levels, but it is annoying to deal with. So it's kind of if you've got a good one, then bring one. I wouldn't sort of ruin your whole team just to bring one, but I would say, yeah, maybe I'd drop that down a couple. Decreased speed, I think, is really important. I didn't used to have this as high as this on my sort of priorities. But yeah, now for me, decreased speed, super important. Decrease attack, especially if Wrath's out. I know loads of people run teams without revivers. I always do terrible, but I also refuse to run manual. So even when we're pushing Hydra class, I'll just keep it running on auto until it hits a damage threshold that I'm happy with, and then I'll just save that key. So for me, a reviver, a healer, and then I would say, your decreased defense, your damage, your torment counter, whether that's a Rector Drath or a Duchess with Perfect Veil, or whether that's a Shamel, or whether that's a Newt to whack it really hard. And then, things that I would say are still really important, but you can live without them, but they're really, like Hex is massive for your damage. Increased speed is amazing. I would say decrease is more important, but increased speed is still super important. Some protective buffs, in fact, I might also sort of group ally protection in there, just some buffs to help your team be tankier. You're going to take a lot of damage. Cleanse, leech, really important for healing back up. Again, depends on your team. If you've got a dedicated healer who's pumping out loads of healing, you don't need leech, but it's always nice to have. I mean, everything's nice in Hydra, but you can't bring everything. Okay, so let's talk about planning your team. Sorry, I've got my things mixed up. So, and I've talked about this loads. I've got a whole video on that, which I'll link here. But essentially, you're trying to cover these roles. Yeah, I don't know. I have got it, but I didn't have it on this sheet, so apologies. Here you go. I think it's on one of the earlier ones. This is how I plan my teams. And apologies because that comes out quite small. What I'm looking at is, okay, how many of those things can I get in? But this is me. I'm quite visual. Which is, okay, I want the champ, and I like doing it with pictures because that's helps me see what I'm missing. But yeah, what I really want is at least 2 damage dealers, ideally 3. This is an old one, but it's good for illustration. And you can, I've got a reviver and a torment counter here. I've got my mischief tank and provoker here. I've got my decreased defense and block buffs champ, and then I've got damage dealer who also brings a lot of debuffs, which is great, decreased attack and hex, and then I've got a speed champ. Yeah, so this could easily be Lady Kimmy. Damage dealer could be anyone, Taras, Royal Guard, whoever you want. Ugo could also be Uko. Bivald could be Skull Lord Vargal or whoever you want. There's no fixed rule. Like, I see teams out-damaging my teams that don't follow the sort of my map of sort of champs that I would bring. And that's fine. But yeah, I've got a whole video talking about the different roles. But usually for me, revive, block buffs, you know, and a debuffer. You know, you want someone who's bringing decreased defense, decreased attack, mischief tank, at least 2 damage dealers, and somebody who's bringing at least decreased speed. But this is where you can double up on people, like let's say Chumisia, where she's bringing your damage and your HP burn, and she's bringing that slow, is great. Okay. And in terms of builds, let's just check. Yeah, we've been going a while. So in terms of champ, this is the one that I get people asking about all the time. Champ builds. Okay, this is what you want. Roughly, I would say you want your support champs, and I would say these numbers, like there is no limit. Like Nightmare, ideally you want, I would say, in fact, I'd probably change this and say you want your damage dealers around 240 and you probably want your supports around 280. Again, if you're pushing Clash, it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking, and I'll probably do another sort of Hydra progression, because the start is, okay, I want to get into Hydra, I want to build a team, I want to do some damage, I want to get a chest, and then it's you want to one-key the top, you know, then you want to get the top chest, then you want to one-key the top chest, then you want to move on to the next difficulty up to hard, and then you want to get, you know, a chest on hard and a chest on normal, and then you want to push for the top chest on hard, and then you want to take that team and push that team into brutal, and you'll find that you'll swap out champs here and there as you go up that progression. You'll also find that you'll improve your builds loads. Like I just rebuilt my Morley. It's funny because we were having a chat in Discord with people who were not fans of Morley, and you know, some of us were like, no, she's amazing, and then other people were like, no, what are you talking about, she's in my vault. Oh my god, if I had a second Morley. I mean, actually Archer, I would say, is probably better than Morley now in that role, but Morley's really good because she brings loads of turn meter boost as well. So though I'll circle back to that in a minute. So I would say you want your supports to be quick. I would say, you know, 220 speed, and then yeah, depending on the difficulty that you're looking at. So on hard, do you know what, the accuracy requirements aren't big, and you can have your people at relatively normal speeds. Yeah, I would expect everybody to be hitting, you know, 220 on your support champs, 200 on your damage dealers. I would say lower than 200 is, you know, don't be running people at like 170, like your arena nukers, that's too slow. If you're running a mischief tank, you're going to need resist on them, and that's the challenging number to hit. That's always quite high. So just bear that in mind. Like the accuracy requirements on Hydra aren't that bad, but the resist requirements are for your mischief tank. So, and again, brutal, that goes up. I would say at least 230 on your supports and at least 220 on your damage dealers, and the accuracy and resist go up. And then nightmare, there's no limit. Let's change this. Let's call it 260 plus. Okay, that's fair. It depends. Again, it depends really if you're pushing Clash or if you're just looking to one-key. There is just, I used to have like a spreadsheet with like all the best damage dealers for the different, like all the best champs for the different roles, like who are the best damage dealers, who are the best supports, you know, who are the best revivers, who are the best mischief tanks. But there are so many more options now that I like keeping that up to date would just be, I mean, I'll link to it in the description, but you know, I haven't added like some of the newer champs to come out, like the new Monster Hunter champs aren't on there. Sets that are great. Relentless is king in Hydra, like no question about it. Cursed is amazing. Reflex is amazing. Provoke is great, and then Guardian and Immortal were really good. Yeah, you're looking to keep your team alive, but also bring things that you don't have, which is where like Cursed comes in great. You put a Nuko in Cursed, and suddenly you don't need a Hex champ. Okay, so tips, right? This is the last section, which is good because we've been going for a while. I would say, so get the start right. So, and what I mean by this, and oh, sorry, let me flip over. Well, no, I'll not flip over. We'll just talk about it. I'll not flip over to the game. for me, I really like getting the start right, because you outspeed the Hydra. When you've got your increased speed or your turn meter boosts and you've got slow on Hydra, you're going to cycle back around, or you're going to get, you know, cooldown refreshes or whatever. I always, even when I'm full, well, that's not fair, because sometimes when I'm full autoing, I just hit go in my pocket when I'm doing stuff with the family and I just ignore it. But if I can, I'll just spend 5 minutes just getting the start right. Yeah, I'll make sure that, like, on this rotation, the Head of Decay is a bad affinity for Nerganante Archer. I'm going to stop trying to say that in a minute. So she weak hits all the time. So what I want is for her to not weak hit the first time. Because then I've got 2 turns of provoke guaranteed. I can get back around, even if I miss it. Maybe my Yuko's in a provoke set and she'll get a provoke off. But at that point also, it'll be more desynced with the Head of Blight. So I don't need to worry as much about it getting a cleanse off and then getting a poison cloud and then 2 turns of doing nothing. So I always try and get the start right. And that also comes with one of my other points down here, which is know your team. So you can, if you, let's say, and this used to be a trick, and I'm sure people are still doing this, you can change the speeds of the Hydra if you land decreased speed on one and not another. So what a lot of people do back in the day is run Royal Guard and use his A3, the decreased speed. I can't remember what it's called, sorry. Use that until you land it on the Head of Decay and not on the Head of Blight. And that way, Head of Blight will go, you get your block buffs out, you get your decreased speed on the Head of Decay, you don't get it on the Head of Blight, and then Head of Blight will go before Decay goes. So the cleanse will still go off because you didn't bring a provoker, but actually you've already blocked the poison cloud, so it doesn't matter. I mean, it does, it's not ideal, but you can hold some of your you can hold your decreased defense for a turn. You know that it's going to do the cleanse, but you've already blocked the poison cloud, so you're not too worried about that block buffs anymore. Always remember turn meter. When you kill a head, you can get 1 bar of turn meter, or you can get 2 bars of turn meter. Depends when you kill it. If you kill it when it's got really low turn meter, you're going to have a long time to do damage against that exposed head. If you kill it when it's got almost full turn meter, you're only going to get 1 turn meter bar to actually do damage against it. Hold your skills. If you're running manual, just hold your skills. If you can see that there's a Devour Timer that's just about to go off, don't do a big nuke. Wait a turn. Just because it's off cooldown, just wait a turn. Your champ will get devoured, you can do your big nuke, and then you can go straight back to your rotation. You're not spending lots of turns trying to deal with what the Hydra did to you. You're in control and you're the one dictating the fight. Auto is way harder than manual, and that'll come as part of the progression. Yeah, like, if you check my videos like a year ago, it's all about getting that 1 key on Nightmare. Yeah, with the champs that I have and how my teams progress. Well, now it's not about that, and that's on manual. And then you change to going, well, actually, I'd really like to do that on auto. And then you go, okay, well, now I'd like to hit 100 million on auto every time. Well, now I'd like to hit 150 million on auto every time. And it depends on your teams and your comp, and you'll switch people in and out, put them in different builds. Like I just rebuilt Morley way faster in Relentless, and she's way more consistent. Sets can help, yeah. Guardian, Immortal, Relentless is amazing. Reflex, Provoke, Cursed. In a long fight, those things where it's like a really small chance, like those masteries where it's like a 30% chance to give you a bit of turn meter if a buff wears off or if a debuff wears off, over a long fight, because you're talking like an hour for a Hydra fight, for a long Hydra fight, over an hour, they add up. Yeah, those cooldown reductions all add up, those turn meter boosts all add up. Cycler Magic is a bit of a bane at the moment because of the City of Sintranos. Amius, his interaction with them is really annoying. balance your team. Yeah, like a stable team is better than a high damage team if that high damage team isn't stable. So if you need to, bring 4 support champs and 2 damage dealers and go longer into the fight. Yeah, like I think my first team that I was wonkying with Nightmare was just Husk and Geomancer. Geomancer's amazing, but you got to manual him because he'll like burn decapitated heads and stuff that's useless. And you've got to like check if he's one of your if he's one of your 2 main damage dealers and your Husk is about to get devoured, you've got to hold Geo's A3 if Husk's going to get devoured so that you can put it on the head that just devoured Husk. And again, you're relying on the Hydra doing damage to you to reflect that damage back, so it's a bit slower. So ideally, you want to be looking at the turn meter of the Hydras to see which one of them is going to take the turn next and devour him. So that you can pre-burn it with Geo's burn, for example. So yeah, try and balance your team out. On your Mischief tank, they're going to bring us a unique buff themselves. Also, give them the Lightning Cage Mastery. That's great, that's an extra buff. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. Those protected buffs that the Hydra Heads sort of spawn in on will also trigger it. So even if you got block buffs up, you're still going to get that Lightning Cage. Bloodshield Ring. Bloodshield Ring can make a Mischief tank. Loads of people run Shamels as their Mischief tank with just a Bloodshield Ring. Don't bring their unique buffs to the team. If their unique buff is Strengthen, don't bring Strengthen to the team. We talked about damage dealers, so your normal damage dealers are much better on lower difficulties, and your enemy max HP damage dealers are much better on higher levels. To be honest, as we see gear and stat bloat in the game, those normal damage dealers are becoming better at the higher levels because your enemy max HP champs are capped. They're capped at 10% of the Hydra Head's max HP, whereas other damage dealers aren't. And now that we've got things like area bonuses where you can ignore a percentage of defense in Hydra, and to stat bloat from like gear ascension and blessings and all of that, actually we're seeing those normal damage dealers outstrip even in Nightmare. So this is how I started out. If you don't have anyone with block buffs, don't bring buffs, because they can't steal buffs if you don't have buffs. So like, you know, I remember running like Godseeker for ages because she was great. She healed and she didn't bring any buffs and she had revive. So yeah, if you don't have block buffs, you should have, because now you should have Sun Wukong. He was quite recent. Hopefully you've got him. But yeah, I mean, I got to be on my free to play. I was using like an epic at level 50 for ages as my only block buffs champ. And yeah, just know your own sort of synergies. You know, Shamel plus a turn meter booster can be quite effective. I ran in fact, one of the teams that I see performing really well is Shamel plus Necmo. Necmo is the lead, Shamel is the booster, and he's boosting Necmo, who's also boosting your whole team's turn meter. Now, I copied that back in the day, but I don't have a Necmo, so I did it with Deacon Armstrong. He's a turn meter booster as well. He's not as strong as Necmathar, obviously, but that got my highest score on Brutal. It was either Brutal or Hard, can't remember. Back then, whenever it was, I don't know, 6 months, a year ago. But yeah, like that works because he's boosting and then he's boosting the rest of your team. You could do the same with Arbiter, or someone like Geomancer and Soulless, or Taras and anyone who brings loads of buffs like Duchess. Okay, this is just another sort of, way to plan your team. Okay, hold on, let me check. Yes. Okay, that is everything that I wanted to talk to about Hydra for beginners. That was a lot of information. Knowing the heads, how to counter them, what essentials to bring for your team, and just the general mechanics. It's tough. Getting started in Hydra is tough. It feels like you can't do any damage until you sort of start to get into the groove of it. And you will, but it'll take a while, and then you'll start progressing. I still really enjoy Hydra, apart from those weeks when it's really annoying, and then it's really annoying. Anyway, guys, that's it from me. I'm sorry this has been really long. I tried to get everything in that I could, and I'm sure I've forgotten so many things, and then just like talked about Devour Timers halfway through the video and stuff. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps. I'll catch you all in the next one.